Donald Nicknair, born in Keegan, Maine in 1925 at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Why do you say 5 o'clock in the morning?
Because I nearly died.
How does that happen?
I choked.
You choked when you were being born?
I choked, whatever, the afterbirth or whatever this thing was. And my mother just gave me a slap in the butt, and everything loosened up, and it was all set. Never been sick since.
You've never been sick at all?
No, I don't believe in sickness.
Well, what keeps you healthy then?
I'm very healthy. Very healthy specimen. It's funny how things start in life. You know, that was a critical moment for the birth. It was a critical moment. Of course, I don't remember that. But my mother says, you know, they had just a nice slap and that's it. It loosens everything going and everything. I must have dirtied her somehow or other.
So where were you in a relationship with the kids when you were born?
I was the fifth. There was Valère, never knew him. And then there was Bernice and Bernadette. Well, I knew Bernice. Bernadette died before I. Then there was Gerald. He was the fourth, and I was the fifth. And Gerald died. He was 7 years old, and I was 5. That's the genesis there. So we lost 3 babies there in the beginning. And Mother went to see Father, whatever his name was, says, you know, I'm not going to have any more babies. Says, Cecile, go back home, you're going to start having them anyway. And that's what she did. And I never died.
So what was it like growing up there?
Dad was working in a mill. I don't even know what type of work it was, but that was Croix Mills. Yeah. And he worked there for years, and as long as we stayed in Keegan, we were affected with that one year or so. Then we got out of there, and we came to Wallagrass. And Wallagrass, that. Yeah, and so that house is still existing, and it's a dilapidated house, and you know, but the thing with the house is that there was a big field out there, and back of the house, and then Mom used to go pick her berries up there. She used to tie me to a post, and so I couldn't move around, but you know, I had berries anyway. And on that hill, that was a productive hill. I don't know why they had berries there. It just was natural berries, I guess. And for the years that we were there for a number of years. And then Dad started working the railroad, and then he had the lines with a few other men up and down the railroadway. And he worked, in those days, would you believe, for $18 a week. And we were not that numerous. Bernice was existing then, Gerald was there, and I was there. The others had gone. The 2 first babies and the 4th baby died. He was 7 years old. That was in Eagle Lake, so that was not in Wallagrass. So then we lived that life. So the memories of those days was picking berries and up and down the hills and stuff like that, you know, and grass and whatever. I must have had grass, I suppose. I don't know. You can get used to all kinds of things. And we were there for a few years. Then they moved to Eagle Lake, and then they bought a house. I don't know if that was it was the house that we had there on 3rd Street in Eagle Lake, and they bought whatever was there and they built on it. You know, they started, and the progression of the family was there in Eagle Lake. After Wallagrass, it was Eagle Lake, and then they had a doctor here, and Daddy had his stable job on the railroad, and Mother taught school once in a while, you know, between babies, and that whole life was school teaching and railroad working, and the railroad people, they had the Alwood family right next door to us, and the Saucier family. I was acquainted with a little girl that was called Tantou, and I thought I was going to marry her, evidently, you know, just as my future wife. 4 years old I was in those days. And then Mrs. Saucier came with that daughter to the house one day, and the mother had dressed me up to receive the visit and what have you, and so the girl and I went out working in puddles of mud, and we came back dirty. They had to wash us, both of us. So that was my first love affair.
Did you have any other love affairs after that?
Oh yeah, all the time. But then the point was that this was the period of 1 to 4 years old, 4 or 5 years old. And then when we started to go to school was no, I went to school, I was 4 years old. My mother couldn't stand me anymore.
How did you say that? Why did you say that? Couldn't stand
because I was too active.
When you're saying you're too active, what is it that
running and teasing and you know.
Well, wait, what kind of stuff did you tease her with that made her upset?
I suppose I must have teased the girls, Bernice, with her dolls. Bernice had dolls. Bernice was quiet. And Gerald was quiet. But Bernice had dolls, and you know, I like to know what there was in the dolls, so I'd undo the dolls, and then I couldn't put them back together again. See, that's at 4 years old I went to school. I had Bernadette White as a teacher. That's the White. They had a hotel in Eagle Lake. That hotel, that building is gone now, I think. Right next to the Blanchettes. Fabienne, my aunt, and the husband was George Blanchette. They used to cut our hairs, and so he was the first barber, and the kids went there to get barbers. And then the White family was a prominent family. They had a hotel, and then one of the men who married into that White family had a restaurant. They had a movie hall there, and we used to have movies for 25 cents. And that was that period of my youth. I don't remember too much because, you know, we didn't have any money. So when we went to the hall, they bring us into the hall, you know, this sort of thing. The White family, Bernadette White was a school teacher. She was a good school teacher. And she taught at the convent you have the Main Street in Eagle Lake all the way up to the convent. That's why she taught me there. And then later on, it was a Mr. Fournier who taught me in the grammar school that was right next door to our home on 3rd Street. And he was a man that took interest in the kids, and he followed them, and he counseled them, and he helped them learn, you know, all the tricks of teachers. What was his first name? Fournier, Tom Fournier. And then So we lived those days, and then when the time came for higher education, my mother said, you know, you won't have any high schools in Eagle Lake, and if you'd have to go to high school in Fort Kent, that would mean busing and so forth. I went to the Franciscan school in Sorrel, province of Quebec. And I was there with the very nice people that I had, that Father Bernard Tétrault.
How old were you when you went?
13 years old.
You were 13 years old when you left.
13 when I left Eagle Lake, and I've been away since that time. And I went to Sorrel, and we used to, and I couldn't travel. We had the passes, but you see, like it was expensive to travel.
How did you feel about being away from your family for so long for that kind of education?
I was learning something, so that was fine. I was never bothered with that sort of thing. Well, I was emotional in the sense that, you know, you miss the kids. As a matter of fact, I came home. The first time I came home from Sorrel, was it at Christmas? Probably, yes. And the kids received me at home as though I was king, big shot king, you know. And you know, we teased each other. What was you doing there? What was I learning there? Then we talked this sort of thing. And you know, we had a very warm family. I mean, Bernice with her dolls, and Gerald was quiet.
Now, Gerald, I don't know too much about Gerald because he died early, right?
He died. He was 7 years old. I was 5.
And what happened to him?
It's food poisoning.
And how did they get the food poisoning?
Supposedly, we say little green apples. Because in the fields next to our home, there were little apples, little green apples. He ate some of those. I suppose he had an indigestion, whatever that was, and he died. So at 7 years old, I lost a little brother that says, you know, I wanted to wake him up. He wasn't waking up.
So you were the one who discovered his bond then?
No. This is, see, mother then was, my mother was taking care of him, and she was explaining what was going on and so forth and so on. But you know, at 4 years old, what do you understand? So, but that's where we were. So then, that was the beginning of that life. That was all in the homestead where we were on 3rd Street. There was no numbers in those days. You know, we didn't need any numbers. They knew Fred Nicknair's place, next to Alwood's place, next to Bumble place, and you know, so forth. They were all there. But we used to have a garden there, and so all of us worked in that garden. At whatever age we were, picking up little carrots that we ate, and weeding out whatever else there was in those gardens. But they always had a garden. They had a garden. They had a chicken coop. And they had a little barn where they had cow and pigs and that sort of thing. And we were growing with everything we had. We amassed at home, and we grew with those chickens and so forth. And when they were ready for the table, they were on the table. As simple as that. And in the fall, a little pig would be butchered, and we'd have. What I remember of the little pigs is that we used to have blood sausage, and they make the blood sausage at home.
Were you part of that process when you were?
No. And then we had calves. The calves that were male, we'd kill them in the fall. That was the meat, beef meat, pork meat, chicken meat. We had all the meats that we needed. I mean, we didn't need anything else. What Daddy used to work on the railroad, and one of the things that I find in the habits of the home, every week Dad came back with his checks, $18. Give it to Mom. So Mom would say, well, why don't you change the check? And he'd go change the check and buy her a box of chocolates. And those were as much of the recreational things that we had, and they were cheap chocolates, because in those days a dollar box for chocolate was just about what we had. That went through all our youth until I got to 13 years old, and then I went to Sorrel with the Franciscans, and the Franciscans were good people. All those people that I had then are all dead now. But I'll tell you, there's some people that were there were really good. Bernard Tetro, he was a cripple. He had had an automobile accident, and the legs were paraplegic, whatever it was. And he used to play pool with us, entertain the kids. We had little pool tables, very simple life. And I learned French there. And I came back, I was first in the class. At Christmas time, yeah.
I heard you were quite the football player.
Well, we played sports. We played baseball, we played football, we played all that stuff. But what we did in Sorrel that I'd never seen in my life, we used to pick up big bullfrogs and eat the legs. We'd cook them on the shore. And for the life of me, I see that done now in restaurants, but in those days it was sloppy. God, it was sloppy.
What made it sloppy?
Because blood and all this stuff.
The frogs trying to get away from you?
That's right. But we were the boys that were there. We were a small class. I think maybe 15, 20 people. That's all we were. At the school, it's one or 2 years of study, but I was there 1 year. From then, I moved to Biddeford, Maine, and that was in. I was 14 years old. That was high school. I took high school there. And I've been with the Franciscans from the day I walked into the Sorrel and through Biddeford, Maine for high school, 2 years of college, and then into the novitiate. See, that's the routine. And I made profession in the Franciscan order. I would have been let me see now, 20. Is it possible that late? Well, Sorrel, then Biddeford. I finished high school. I was 17 years old, and I went 2 years of college. That was there in Biddeford. 17, 18 years old, 19 years old. And then I went in, I was about 20, I guess, 21 years old, to Sherbrooke, Canada, the monastery on the hill. And Mother came there, and that was a house where they were living on begging. They received the food from the people that came to bring them food. And we ate, there was a lot of raspberries in that area. We ate raspberries for soup, raspberries for dessert, and raspberries for whatever else, because they had that fruit. And then they begged for the rest of their money, the rest of the food. That was an experience that it astounded me. And when Mother and Father came to see me, when I made profession there, first profession, and they were served a meal in the parlor. They couldn't eat with the Franciscans, and because that was just a no show. And they were astounded by the meals that we received. Begged food. I was too. Good stuff. So the Franciscans were protected. Then I was there 1 year. Then I was 3 years in Quebec City for philosophy. Then I went to Montreal for 4 years of theology, but I stayed there 3 years. And I was ordained after 3 years of theology. Priest. In Baker Brook, Maine. Baker Brook, New Brunswick. Baker Brook, New Brunswick. And, you know, that was and then I went to Biddeford, Maine to teach.
Now, Manol, tell me about, I remember you told me one time you actually got to meet Martin Luther King during your...
Oh yeah, well that was in Biddeford. Yes, I was, when I was in Biddeford teaching, see, I taught there from great guns. Well, I was ordained in 52, and in 52, the first class that I had, I don't remember that much, but the second class, they came to visit me 2 weeks ago.
Now, who's that?
These are people that were Paul Lacroix, Paul Perrault, and Gerald Roy, and the three of them came to see me and Father Clarence LaPlante. We were both there. And they brought us to a restaurant and we celebrated. After 46 years ago, I had taught them their first classes. 46 years. So that was this year, 2003, so 46 years ago, just go way back. And they were the first class that the second class that I taught in that school, St. Francis College. And I taught for 22 years. So in that span of time, yes, we did meet Martin Luther King, and the whole group of people's various classes, some very sympathetic, some very hurt, in a convention that we had at the school, and with protection, police protection and everything else, because, you know, that was still segregation in those days, and we didn't want to admit that, but we had it. And Martin Luther King came to make for a 3-day visit, and we had him stay on the Biddeford Pool area in a cottage, and he wasn't received. But we had scheduled a place for him to stay, and so he was there. And he came to the college conference. I have a dream. That was the days of I have a dream. And he repeated that sort of thing as a dream, that the colored people would be treated like everybody else in the country. And that's still going on. I mean, we've emerged from that fast and solid segregation to something that was tolerance or intolerance and so forth. But today is not a bad issue of that, and it turned out fairly well. But there is still some leftovers. Now you know that, you being in Western states and so forth.
Now, did you get to talk with him when you?
Oh yeah.
What did you guys talk about?
We spoke about what they came to tell us. They came to tell us of the segregation in this country that was amazing, and after supposing a free country where people are supposed to be respecting one another fully, and they weren't. And I had a dream, and I had a dream. That was knocked into our heads very strong. And we had an attendance there that was really, really pleasant. It was one of the greatest facts, I think, of life that we had at the school. That impressed the students and the teachers. I was a teacher then. And yes, I had dinner with Martin Luther King and the few others. You know, I don't even remember their names. But we had 4 or 5 big wheels. Of the various trends of integration efforts from the colored side and the non-colored side. So you said, so we talked about integration. That's what we talked about. And it stayed with the student body that we had. We didn't have that many students, 300-400 students in those days. But then, and Martin Luther King went on to big things, and he was killed not very long after he'd come to our place, because he didn't belong in the North, and the North didn't want to see him. And he had made in his speech, he had spoken about what's the difference between Natchez, Mississippi, and Manchester, New Hampshire. Okay, it's just the same people have the same prejudices. That stayed with me a long time. We are piles of prejudices, and we don't admit it. We're fair, you're not fair. This sort of thing. That's simple. That's simplicity expressed, but it's a good thing to see what happened. And Martin Luther King made a lasting image with us at the school. We never forgot that. And we had crowds. And they had the only halls we had was the gymnasiums. We packed the gymnasiums with it was not a big gymnasium. It was just a local, responding to a local need. But we had that, and then we had loudspeakers on all the grounds. And so they had some people demonstrating against, and some people demonstrating for. I mean, and in Biddeford, Maine, it's surprising to find that, so we have no problems, but we don't like you, so don't stay here. Then we started having college kids colored with the football, basketball, and the sports. The sports really were an integrating element for the colored people. They always have been. The Robinsons are still existing, and the first baseball colored man was in Montreal. He was on a team in Montreal, and then he migrated into Chicago and Boston and so forth. But that took a long time. But he started in Montreal. And so the Expos in Montreal had that heritage to remember. And whenever they had any festivities, they invited those people to be part of the history of the franchise that was the Expos. So that's more or less important. But the impression that Martin Luther King gave us was that the world needs to be acquainted with everybody in it and respect everybody in it. And that takes a long time to drive home. You say theoretically, we have no problems. Like Biddeford had no problems, but you couldn't go in a restaurant and eat there with the colored folks. And they say, no problems? What do you mean, no problems? You have all the problems that are existing everywhere that are prejudicial to the growth of peoples. So anyway, whatever that made of an impression lasting and changing, after that we had every year more and more college students and more participating in sports and more of this sort of thing. And that participation in sports was participation in classroom work, in activities, whatever they were, debate teams and stuff like that. And so they got be part of the school, like they should have been in the first place. So Father Clarence LaPlante was president of the college then, and I was the dean. And I was the dean of studies, and I was dean of men, and I had for 22 years I taught there at the school, and I had every position but the presidency. And then we used to go out and recruit people for the school. I traveled all the way down to New York City and Massachusetts and Connecticut and so forth and so on. And we'd go to these various meetings to publicize St. Francis College to them, and we got a lot of students along the way of Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maine, New Hampshire, and all this stuff, and Pennsylvania, New York, and sometimes further, Virginia and what have you. But that was later. today that's cool. The school has been we let it go to a lay board, and they developed it into a university. It's been so they've had a university. Today they have close to 4,000 students. But then they amalgamated like Westbrook College, like other little colleges that were around that failed. We didn't fail. I mean, it just kept on going and on going. But we were not there anymore. See, we left the college grounds. Oh my dear, 70, 75, or 76, somewhere around there. And then I came into Canada, and that was the end of my work in education. 22 years in education. I came to Canada, and I was 28 years straight responsible for houses and friars. Parish in Welland for some times, but you know, all of these things, always a mandate of authority. That's why I boss. I boss everybody. In the school system, I was bossing, and in the sector, the Franciscan working center, I was in the authority. The house where I am now. I was 9 years superior there than I was superior than in Welland and Quebec and St Paul and everywhere. So you know, it's no wonder I'm bossy. I mean, I've always been boss.
But tell me, I remember you had told some funny stories about your confessional stories. Do you have any of those you want to talk about? No. Okay.
Now, see, what I'll tell you, what we have, I think what I'm going to say is, I've done a lot of counseling. I've developed a clientele of counseling that I still have. And that's why I'm staying where I am. Because, you know, the clientele is used to me there. I preach to them every day. I still do that. I have the 5 o'clock mass every day, and it's a little acquaintance with the ones and the other, and they come to talk to you for various reasons. Their home problems, their education problems, their kids' problems, their marriage problems, whatever they have. And then you keep advising them to behave Christianly and so forth, so that they can amass tenderness and goodness and kindness to people, so forth.
Now, why did you become a Franciscan priest? What was the turning point for you?
St. Francis. When I was a student, I'd read Life of St. Francis by Timmermans.
Oh, you know what? Hang on. Look at that.
Okay. My first acquaintance with St. Francis of Assisi is the book of St. Francis, Felix Timmermans. And I read that, and that really swayed me. Then I got involved with St. Anthony. I had a devotion to St. Anthony, and I prayed St. Anthony that I could be whatever I was going to be, and so forth. And St. Anthony of Padua, yes. And St. Francis of Assisi were the makers of my vocation. And that's, and I've been there ever since. 51 years so far.
How old are you now?
I am 78 years old. 78 years old and still writing.
You don't look him enough.
Well, but what I've kept, see, is the counseling. The counseling part I've kept. The rest of the authority there I dropped. At the last elections we had last summer, in the summer of 2002, the provincial wanted me to take over the big monastery in Rosemont, the eastern part of the island of Montreal. And I says, Father Provincial, I served the schools for 22 years. I've served your houses for 28 years. Would you please leave me alone? And that's what happened. But I am not alone. I still have my clientele that comes for counseling regularly, and that's going on all the time.
So we're going to jump way back now.
Okay.
I'd like to know, was your grandparents alive when you were alive? And do you have...
No.
No.
My grandfather, Nicknair.
Yes.
I remember because when I left for Quebec, and I left for Sherbrooke in Quebec, I was in Quebec City when Grandfather Nicknair died. I couldn't even leave there to come to the funeral.
Now, what did he die of?
Old age, probably.
Because I heard some rumor that he actually died by being a lumberjack with a tree coming down on him. Or who was that?
No, that's mother's father.
What happened to him?
George Labbe. George Labbe went to, in those days they had some wooding enterprise here in northern Maine, but then they traveled to all the Great Lakes to Sault Ste. Marie, exactement. And grandfather George Labbe, I didn't know him, and he did die of a felled tree. Yeah. And so, and Grandma, Josephine, what was her family? Michaud. Josephine, she was related to Thomas Michaud down in the Soldier Pond dip there. That's that Michaud family. And Grandma was a school teacher.
Did you take classes with her?
No. I didn't know her. She was gone when we came. And on the Nicknair side, you have Frank Senior. He was our grandfather, and I remember him. But George Labbe I don't remember, and Josephine we don't remember either.
What was Frank Senior like?
Frank was he's a short man. He's a short man, but for some reason or other, he was like my own father, and he'd sing, and they'd rock the kids and play with the kids. They were family people, like grandfather was, like my dad was, and but my dad was sort of, let me put it this way, in the Nicknair home, our Nicknair home. Fred, my father, was goodness, kindness. He'd rock us on his foot. Every kid went through that, and he'd put him in his lap and sing to them, and so forth and so on. Mother was the disciplinarian. When Mother said, I'll tell your father something if you don't behave tonight, but your poor dad, he couldn't face that stuff. But mother was a school teacher, and she was a disciplinarian, and she ran the show. And with all due respect, we loved Mother because she knew what she wanted, and she pursued it, and like she brought us all to school. If it hadn't been for Mother, we wouldn't have gone to school. And then all of us, from the oldest to the youngest, all went through the school system as far as was possible. Some further, some less farther. But you see, like you have the one of the last ones that's here, Jean-Louis, and he's been teaching for 38
in college.
38 years. That's unbelievable. He taught longer than I did. He taught longer than Bernice did. He taught longer than Mama did. But that's the trend that we took. It was school-oriented family, and that was Mother's driving force, and she did that very well. And she always found some pennies for us to bring with us. And I'll tell you, the first time I left for school, I had 10 cents in my pockets. And I don't know if I probably stole it to get it, but we just didn't have anything. It was when I went to Sorrel to see that was the beginning. With the Franciscans, well, I was still a beggar Franciscan, and I still am. I still am. The last year in René Lévesque Boulevard in Montreal, I was able to overcome a deficit of $50,000 by simply begging here and begging there. And oh, by the way, last week we received a check for $50,000 that's going to help us to bring this budget of 2003 correct. But the budget of 2002 exceeded $500,000 for 17 friars that we are there, and I was responsible for that. But I managed to amass those funds that accumulated sufficiently to make that budget clear, clean, and with a little surplus, you know, on $500,000, maybe $5,000. You know, I mean, the minute you close the doors, it's spent. You know. And then this year, well, it's a new administration, and I've kept away from the administration. But I still receive some funds that I'm going to give them. I give them in whenever I walk into the house. But we started a begging routine from the time I became a Franciscan to the time today, and it's still the same thing. And if we did not have the benefactors